The version of Robert Irwin's future that most people expected was actually quite simple. He could have spent his life living off his famous last name, making the occasional public appearance, and keeping the Irwin legacy alive. No one would have blamed him for choosing that path. In fact, many people probably assumed that was exactly what would happen. But Robert had something very different in mind. Instead of relying on his father's reputation, he worked quietly to build a name that belonged entirely to him. And that's when everything started to change. As a teenager, Robert began appearing regularly on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Each visit brought something new, from snakes and birds to reptiles and other incredible wildlife. Audiences loved watching him because he wasn't putting on an act. His excitement was genuine. His knowledge came naturally. He explained animals with the same passion that once made Steve Irwin famous, but he never sounded like he was trying to copy his father. He had found his own voice, and people responded to it in a big way. But television was only one part of the story. Away from the cameras, Robert was developing another remarkable talent. Photography had become much more than a hobby. He spent countless hours capturing wildlife through his camera lens, creating images that reflected both beauty and urgency. His work quickly gained international attention, and in 2020, he won a major wildlife photography competition with a breathtaking image showing an Australian forest devastated by bushfires. The photograph wasn't simply beautiful. It told a heartbreaking story. It reminded people what nature was losing and why protecting it mattered more than ever. Terri immediately understood what her son was doing. Robert wasn't just taking pictures of animals. He was using photography to inspire people to care about conservation. Without saying many words, he was encouraging millions to see the natural world through different eyes. It was another sign that he wasn't simply following in Steve's footsteps. He was creating his own path while honoring everything his father believed in. But then came something that almost nobody saw coming. When Robert announced he would compete on Dancing with the Stars, plenty of people were surprised. After all, most knew him as a wildlife expert, not a dancer. Few expected him to become one of the biggest stories of the season. Yet week after week, he amazed both the judges and the audience. He wasn't just learning dance routines. He was telling emotional stories through every performance, revealing a completely different side of himself that millions had never seen before. At only 21 years old, Robert stepped onto one of television's biggest stages with confidence, humility, and a willingness to challenge himself. The audience quickly realized they weren't simply watching Steve Irwin's son compete. They were watching Robert Irwin become a star in his own right. Every performance moved him a little further away from the shadow that had followed him since childhood. But here's what made the journey even more meaningful. For most of his life, every interview, every public appearance, and every animal encounter came with the same unspoken comparison. People constantly wondered whether he could ever live up to his father's extraordinary legacy. That kind of pressure could have easily overwhelmed him. Many people would have struggled under that weight. Instead, Robert did something remarkable. Rather than trying to become another Steve Irwin, he focused on becoming the very best version of himself. His conservation work reflected that same mindset. Instead of relying only on memories of his father, Robert spoke passionately about today's environmental challenges. He shared real stories about endangered species, disappearing habitats, and the urgent need to protect wildlife before it was too late. His message wasn't built on nostalgia. It was built on action. He wanted people to care because the problems were happening now, not simply because Steve once inspired them. For Terri, this was everything she had quietly hoped for over the years. She wanted her son to honor Steve's memory without losing his own identity. Watching Robert confidently step into his own future brought an overwhelming mix of relief, pride, and emotion. After years of wondering whether the world would always see him only as Steve Irwin's son, she finally watched millions recognize him for exactly who he had become. But nothing compared to the unforgettable night that would leave Terri in tears in front of the entire world.